Hey friends, Matt aka Martin here, and in this video I want to show you 3 different ways that you can turn basically any sound into a synth inside of Ableton Live 11. Let's go. Okay, so for this first synth sound, we need to start with some kind of tonal sound. This should be something like a vocal, or maybe something that has some kind of tonal element to it. Here I have a vocal ad-lib that sounds like this that we're going to use. So what I'm going to do first is go to a new MIDI track and simply click and drag this sample onto this MIDI track. And that will load this sample up into a simpler device. I'm going to switch the mode on simpler to classic mode, and now I'm going to grab a part of the sample where there's only a single note playing. And the middle of this is pretty good. So if I move this to the middle, the start point, and move the end point towards where that note stops, we now basically get just a single portion of this vocal playing, which is only a single note. And already we're starting to turn it into a synth, but we want it to be able to be held out for as long as we want. So in order to do this, I'm going to engage the loop function in Simpler, and I'm going to increase this start amount and then increase the fade amount. And what that's going to allow us to do is to effectively hold this out for as long as we want, whilst also having a bit of a smoother transition between when these sound kind of crosses over the point where it starts and ends. And so now what we need to do is figure out what note this is actually playing. There's a few different ways that we can do this. The easiest and quickest way is to use Ableton Live's tuner device. So I'm going to add Ableton Live's tuner after this here, and then I'm going to press C on my MIDI keyboard, or you could use your computer keyboard or just create a C MIDI note, however you want to do it. I'm going to play C here. And we can see that when I'm playing C, this tuner is showing a D sharp, meaning that we're a little bit out of tune. So in order to kind of bring ourselves back into tune, I'm going to go to the Controls tab, bring down the transposition or bring up the transposition so that the note I'm playing on the MIDI keyboard matches the note that's being output in tuner. So in order to do this, I'm going to bring it down 3 semitones. And now when I play a C, we're actually hearing a C. Awesome. It's a little bit wavering. That doesn't matter too much. And now we can adjust the envelope, say increase the attack, increase the release here a little bit as well. And now we have a nice kind of vocal pad sound. From here, you can add further effects like reverb, delay, anything else you'd add to a synth sound. But let's jump into the next way of turning pretty much any sound into a synth sound. So for this next method, you can use basically any sample at all. In fact, we're going to use a kick drum for this example. So here is the sound that I have. It's just a basic kick drum, which sounds like this. And we're going to start off the exact same as we did previously. I'm going to go to a blank MIDI track and click and drag this sample onto that MIDI track. From here, we're going to again change this to classic mode, except now what we're going to do is instead of finding a tonal part of this sound, I'm going to go and turn off the snapping here, which makes it so that we can basically move the start and end points of this sample freely without worrying about it snapping to a 0 crossing point. And then I'm going to find a part of this sample that I want to start at. Let's find one that has a decent amount of harmonics, so maybe closer to the start here, maybe right here. And I'm going to try and make it so that it's lined up with where this line crosses this middle line. So this is a good point right here. And then I'm going to grab the end of this and bring this back really close to the start. So now what this is going to do is play just a really small section of this sample. And currently, because we're not set to loop, it's just going to basically sound like a click. But as I set this to loop, it's going to loop this really short segment of this sample. And if we decrease this distance between the end and the start of the sample, it will actually start to become quite tonal. And if we select a really small bit of this sample, say half a wave cycle or a whole cycle, we now basically get the ability to turn this sound into a synth. Once again, we need to figure out what note we're actually playing, so I'm going to add another tuner device after this sampler. Play a note. Let's play a C on my keyboard. And we can see when I'm playing a C, it's actually playing an out of tune E. So we're going to go back to that Controls tab, bring this down a few semitones, so 4 semitones, and then detune it down by 16 cents because that's how far out we are. And now when I play a C, we're actually hearing a C output, and lo and behold, we've turned a kick drum into a synthesizer. You can get some really cool and interesting effects and sounds using this technique. By the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider leaving a like down below and subscribe if you're new. And if you really want to support me further, there's a link down below in the description where you can support me by buying me a coffee, downloading any sample packs or Ableton Live racks, or supporting me on a monthly basis by becoming a member through my Buy Me a Coffee. Now, the last way that I'm going to show you only works in Ableton Live 11 Suite. So if you don't have Ableton Live 11 Suite, this won't work for you, but it uses 2 of Ableton Live's audio effects, Spectral Resonator and Corpus. So once again, this technique will work with any single sound. I'm going to use this weird kind of sci-fi mechanical sample that I found here, which sounds like this. Pretty cool as is, but again, we're going to start by clicking and dragging this onto a blank MIDI track so it creates a simpler device using this sample. I'm going to set the mode to classic, and I'm again going to set it to loop, but then I'm going to drag this so that we have kind of just continuously playing amount of the sample here, but the length doesn't matter in this regard. We do want it looped, and you probably want it faded. I guess it doesn't really matter hugely, but we can increase the start position and increase the fade amount a little bit. And now we have a sound that, you know, is just kind of looping a section of that sample. Now this sounds kind of cool depending on the sample, but it doesn't sound particularly tonal. We're going to change that. So the first thing we're going to do is add Ableton Live's Corpus device after this simpler. So let's introduce a Corpus. And now in the Corpus device, for those of you that don't know what Corpus does, basically it kind of runs any sound through a physical model of some kind of object. We have beams, marimbas, strings, membranes, plates, pipes, tubes, and a bunch of controls of that particular object. Now, what's really cool about Corpus though is we can tune the resonant frequency to an incoming MIDI note. I'm going to open up this side panel using this little arrow button right here, click on this MIDI from drop-down menu, and then choose the MIDI track that this simpler device is on as the incoming MIDI, and then click on this frequency button. So if I turn off the frequency button, we basically have this sound running through a beam, which sounds like this. I can change the tuning of this beam sound with this tune control, which sounds pretty cool in and of itself, but if we turn back on that frequency control, this tuning control now becomes set to a transpose control because the tuning of this particular device is set by the incoming MIDI note. So now if I play some sounds, if I increase the dry wet, we're now just hearing this Corpus. We can maybe adjust the start and end position of this sample as well, and then adjust some of the parameters in here to basically change the envelope of the tuned portion of this sound. Let's increase the decay, decrease the material, and maybe change this to, say, a string. Let's increase the release on this simpler as well. Now this in and of itself is pretty cool, but we're going to add one more device to make this really even more interesting, which is Ableton Live's Spectral Resonator. So I'm going to add a Spectral Resonator device after this Corpus. And once again, this Spectral Resonator device kind of resonates the sound in a similar way to Corpus, but we have the ability to tune the resonant frequency to an incoming MIDI note. And why I'm using Spectral Resonator here is because Corpus basically only allows us to tune to a single MIDI note, but Spectral Resonator allows us to polyphonically tune the resonant frequencies. So I'm going to go to the resonator device here in the left panel, select MIDI, and once again select MIDI from the mechanical nano 4 channel, and then change this mono mode to poly. And now we have the option of having 8, 16, 4, or 2 different voices of polyphony. Leave this set to 8 for the moment, and now have a listen to what happens when I play a note. We now get this really cool resonant sound coming through. As I increase the decay, this resonance will last for longer. And if I want to hear more of the original sound coming through, I'll pull down this dry wet control. And you also have some other parameters here that you can play around with to change the sound of the Spectral Resonator by adding a chorus to it, increasing the unison amount. And then once again, you can add any more effects like reverbs, distortions, delays, whatever it is you want to turn this sound into something really, really, really cool. But I just think this is a really, really, really cool method. And so there you have it. There are 3 different ways that you can turn basically any sound into a synthesizer using Ableton Live 11. If you want to check out some more cool sound design techniques, check out this video right here. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you all in the next video.